Oh, audio is on. Folks, if you can hear me, I'd like for you to raise your hand. My name is Jackie Utter, and I'm hoping we're going to start with our webinar called Understanding Standards-Based Grading. I am recording this session, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions and have a good discussion today about all-around standards. The people in the room with me is Tiffany Perkins from Curriculum and Instruction, and Rosalind Galloway and Hunter Huffman. So at this point, if you, let's see, where are the hands? I'm not seeing.
Attending.
Okay. Stuff does not want to. All right. So there we go. Thank you very much. I want you to be able to speak, so I'm hoping that you're able to respond in the audio portion. Let me just pick on somebody. Francine, can you talk to me and can I hear you? Oh, how about if I do that? I can't let me go. Why is it not unmuting? Attendee is muted by organizer. I don't. Oh, I hear somebody.
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
Yeah, I am so sorry. I'm not quite sure what was happening there.
Yeah, we're having some technical challenges. We don't want everybody. Okay.
Yeah. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand and we will unmute you and allow you to ask the questions, but we will keep everyone muted for the purposes of making sure everyone can hear. Ready?
I think I am.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started with the webinar. Good morning, everyone. This is Rosalind Galloway, and we want to have a conversation, so I want it to be very collaborative, and we're going to talk about understanding standards-based grading and how it applies and what you can do within PowerSchool. Dr. Perkins is going to speak from her practice and her experience, but also if you have questions, curriculum type questions, she can answer those questions. She does have to leave, and if we have additional questions, we will take those and we'll get those back to her, and she can give us some feedback, and we will get those answers back to you. So we want to talk about standards grading from a theoretical perspective, also talk about and discuss some of the decisions you need to think about and thinking through as you move forward towards implementing standards. We're going to show you what the standards look like and what you would get from DPI as far as the implementation into PowerSchool. And then we can talk about what those look like in other systems, or I'll try to address some of those, but also give you an understanding of what the hierarchy looks like in PowerSchool, and then look at it from a grading or assessing perspective with rubrics versus grade scales, and then actually looking at it in PowerSchool. Is that right, Jackie?
That is correct.
Okay. So moving right along, we want you to understand that this is a process. It's not one of those to take lightly and just jump feet first into it, but we're going to have a conversation about it. It's not about rolling up your sleeves today and performing this work as we talk about it, We're going to talk through the concepts and what you need to be thinking about. We definitely view this as a collaboration with DPI and your curriculum leaders and your technical Power School staff as well, working together to get everyone to a comfortable place that they can utilize standards. The end result is effective communication with educators and parents, students, so that everyone knows how students are performing and what, how they are achieving and mastering content standards. So Tiffany, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Rosalind. So my previous experience with standards-based grading goes back to going through this process and developing standards-based reporting at the local education agency level and providing central office leadership through that process. It truly is a cultural shift, and it's really important for districts to gauge the readiness of their community, both their school communities and their family, the families in your community, as far as readiness for standards-based. But essentially, if you think about traditionally, we have used averages, right? We give students assignments, we grade them, we do an average at the end of the course, semester, or year. Standards-based grading is very different in that it provides information to parents and to students specific to content standards. And so if you think about how we might go about doing that, rather than having a 97 in mathematics, you might report to parents that these 5 priority standards were the focus for this quarter, and the level of attainment of that standard or mastery of that standard for your student is X. However, you set up the reporting criteria. Again, and that can be very flexible. It can look different from community to community in terms of district to district. So a big caution that we always give is that sometimes when standards-based reporting is implemented, teachers tend to want to narrow their instruction to a standard, but we know that is not best practice. So we don't want setting priority standards and reporting on priority standards to lead to that isolation and instruction. So that's just a caution, and we will provide for you some great research resources that I would encourage you to read and study with your district leadership as well as principal leadership to kind of gauge your readiness at the district level for a shift to standards-based reporting.
Do we have questions?
Yeah, I don't see.
There's a couple. We're going to pause for just a second and make sure.
There is no.
Okay. Let's go ahead. If those aren't questions, let's go ahead and delete them so they don't show up. In the trash can. There you go.
Okay. So one of the questions is, does the whole district have to go to standards-based grading, or can a few teachers go to it?
That is completely up to the district. You may wish to have a school or certain grade levels within a school that you might want to pilot some standards-based reporting. I will tell you that what we elected to do when we implemented was start with kindergarten and first grade only. And that was a decision that was made based on what information we had, what we knew parents might be ready for, and then we continuously surveyed throughout the course of the first year of implementation. It took about a good 1.5 to 2 years to really get to implement actually reporting standards-based grading. So we started with kindergarten and first grade. So again, it wasn't a district-wide requirement, K-12, and then we added on second grade. And so I'm not sure where that particular district is now with standards-based reporting, but again, I think that's the local decision on how you want to manage that. I would think about, though, making sure if you're selecting just a couple of teachers to do it, that for consistency with parents within a school, you would probably want to ensure that, so if you have a second grade teacher that's an early adopter, or excuse me, a kindergarten teacher rather, or whatever grade that's an early adopter, but that all the teachers at that grade level are reporting consistently in terms of, you know, just equity and transparency for parents.
Yeah, that's where we are.
Okay.
So this slide actually is looking at standards and subjects. So this particular slide is trying to get you focused on what kind of standards are we talking about. So this example is from the extended content for math. So if we're going to do standards or utilize standards for the math extended content, we would actually create this spreadsheet, this leveled hierarchy, and we would say this is what we are looking at to assess our students. So when we're looking at the brown lines, this would be called our domains. So for number and quantity, I actually want to see if the students can understand the real number system, and then within that, deeper levels of knowledge of that particular piece. So this is obviously just a short little example. The next domain that we would be understanding or working with would be algebra. And then there are more than one set of SSEs. This is seeing structure, and then we would go on from there. So while this seems kind of technical, it's kind of something that the state gives you the entire list of content of the standards. And at the district level, you need to talk together and work together and say, these are the standards that we want to utilize in this district. So we would then put together this kind of spreadsheet that we will import and use within your PowerSchool and PowerTeacher.
And I'd like to add, this is Tiffany, I would just like to add, it doesn't mean those are the only standards that you teach. Obviously, we teach the entire standard course of study for content area, but these are the ones you're reporting, right, to parents and students as to, so it's within your district what you're prioritizing for reporting. And I want to go back real quickly and note that the question before was about a high school level. I think, again, what I would do is, as long as the teachers that are teaching that same course are reporting similarly, that would be important for consistency, equity, understanding. So that would be, I'm not saying you have to do that, but I'm just thinking about what the implications might be if one, you know, English 2 teacher is reporting standards-based and another is doing grading. Now, there's lots of policy implications at the high school level for this when you think about GPA and things like that. So we'll talk about that a little bit too.
Yes.
Okay. Great question.
Okay.
So Jackie's trying to.
I'm trying to do both, taking notes and doing slides and all kinds of stuff here.
Doing great.
So,
So this is where we were talking earlier. So, and that was a great segue, Tiffany, by the way, because when you're setting up your standards-based templates or your configuration in PowerSchool, you have a couple of things that you need to take into consideration. And this is where, to the question before, if you have teachers that are doing standards versus traditional grading, you have 2 types of scales that you would set up in PowerSchool. One that would have your typical 100-point grading scale, and then you have your standards rubric that you would decide how you want to assess. So in my work in previous years in PowerSchool with a couple of districts, one district chose to use a 5-point rubric, another district chose a 4-point rubric. Totally your decision at the district level. how you want to do that. So those are things you want to think about. And then there's a conversion scale, because in the version of PTPro or Power School, both that we're going to be moving to in July, it gives you some additional functionality that the current version does not have. We did get feedback from the field that we're using standards that at the end of the year there was no way to automatically convert the rubric to a numerical grade. So that's a new feature that's coming in the release in July. I will say there's some additional grading components and decisions that you would need to make, but also within that framework, if the system thinks that or doesn't know what to do, it's going to ask the teacher to make a professional judgment and say, as a professional, you know the best assessment for this student, and the system's not going to do that for you. So it wants the teacher to make their best professional judgment on things, and the system will guide you through those things come in the next release. But also, this gives you the flexibility to distinguish between your behavioral grades versus your
academic content.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we will provide you with that information. And Jackie, you want to speak there? There we go.
Yeah. So when we're actually technical-wise, what we're talking about is currently in Power School version 9, our conversion scale is what we're using to change it from we're having a conversion scale. So what does 1 convert to as a regular grade? So in this new version coming up, all of the conversion scales will be automatically changed to a grade scale, because that is how the new version is going to utilize all of those pieces. You still have the ability to have your alphanumeric, so you can use your O, S, and N, or you can use your 4, 3, 2, 1. So the alpha grade is still there, alpha scale, but now there is a numeric scale so that we can actually use the rubric type grades. So we are going to be changing from an alphanumeric to a straight alpha, a straight numeric, and then the special scales that we'll talk about when we're actually starting this process. So there's still going to be a cutoff. What is the minimum that the student has to earn on the assignment in order to receive that grade? But there's also a grade value. It's the percentage that's going to be used in the calculations. So we are going to be able to use standards inside the assignments, but you can also have these standards listed for you and kind of utilize that content when you're creating your final grade. You can look at all of those standard pieces and say, this student really did get standards A, B, but C through D, C through F didn't do so well. So that's why my professional judgment comes in, and I might want to change that final grade. So all of these grade scales and conversions have been taken into account in this new version, and it really does work very well.
I'll see if we have any questions.
Yeah, I will pause, and my question never stays where I want it to stay. Yeah, it's at the bottom. Okay.
No
I don't see any questions at the moment, so we really want this to be more conversational. Please ask any question. It's not silly. It's not anything you need to know. I'm sure other people are going to want to ask the same thing. So we'll keep going at this point. So what could a parent see, or what would the portal show? So if we're looking at standards, to utilize the standards, the parents can also see. So this person, this example, Mr. Louis Beast, cute name, in the math class that he is in the second semester, he's looking at these, he's been assessed on these particular standards. And I'm trying to get to my screen so I can see it all. So you actually can see in those columns to the right, those are the term columns, N1, N2. That third column is the exam, the E1, and then the final column is the final grade. So they will be able to see how they're doing in each of those standards. So it's not just that you're assessing them, the parents can see where they are and where they're at for each of those standards. And that is tied together between Power School and the Power PTPro gradebook.
And just to point out, so for this student, there's a 3 for E1 on the first standard. You at the local level would have defined and communicated what does that 3 mean when parents see that in the portal. So just to clarify, but you may not have a 3-point scale. You may have a 4-point scale, a 5-point scale. So that again is something that locally you would determine and what the criteria for meeting each of those are, each of those particular points in the scale, and then communicate that to parents and students so they know what that means when they see those.
Right. The communication is the key.
Like a 2 might mean, like a 3 might mean you've mastered. A 2 might mean not quite yet. You're showing some partial mastery, but have a little bit of ways to go. And a 1 might be haven't attained any components of mastery for that. So just throwing that out.
So you may want to add more assignments, more work for those particular standards. Okay, so it seems like I've been here before, and we have, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood that there is a hierarchy. So we're actually talking about, this is 6 levels deep. So we may want to think about what are the content lists that we are getting, and do we want to add another layer or two beneath the determined. So that green is the lowest level at this point, which is at level 6. So we're actually talking about maybe getting rid of some of the top 2 layers so that we can actually get more, dig deeper into some of the content to use as more standards to assess the student with. So I'm not going to get crazy and say this is, you have to understand what ESC dot M1 dot means, but it actually is there for us to understand the basic of how we are going to put it into the system and how it reads it. You have a question. That is awesome. Thanks, Hunter. The question, will the standards be in Power School for all courses, including core courses and CTE courses?
Great question.
Good question.
So we have a standards template that we will provide to you. We are working with our CTE colleagues to get their standards so we can put those in a template format. We don't have those just yet, but we do have, I think we're finalizing the math standards.
Yes.
The new math standards.
High school.
Yes, the new high school math standards.
K-8 math will not be implemented until 18-19.
Correct. So we have the current standards for all grades, all subjects K through 8. We're finalizing the new math standards
for high school.
For high school. We have the new extended content standards.
And when Rosalind says finalizing, she means finalizing the process of getting them in.
Yes.
Like there's not, you know, just don't want to miscommunicate that something's happening with the standards.
Oh, no. The template. We're finalizing the template. And actually, the CTE standards are already in SchoolNet, and we're trying to backtrack them into Power School. So that work is still in progress, so we'll keep you posted on how that's progressing. That's a great question. So she's just boarded.
Okay, hold on, let me send that. So we now have a couple more questions. My question is for when you discuss SBD at the high school level, will the standards look different or be interpreted differently by class course? How will a Spanish teacher like myself interpret standards from a science teacher?
So I think that's where you have a lot of conversation within your district in terms of, like, there's always going to be a level of subjectivity no matter what type of grading you do from teacher to teacher. I mean, that's just a reality. But developing a common rubric for what your grading scale means, and continuing to revisit that and how our teachers within a particular content area. I think it would be really hard across content areas, but you definitely want to make sure within the same content area that there's common kind of some inter-rater reliability about how teachers are applying that grade scale and rubric. But again, I think that's always a challenge we'll face. And so just putting processes in place at the local level to have more and more discussion and work with teachers around inter-rater reliability within a content area.
Awesome.
That's a great question.
Okay, there is another one. Since grades 9 through 13 are required to use the 10-point grade scale, how do we set up everything so that teachers can grade on standards 1 through 5, so it will translate to a numeric grade on the 10-point scale? Okay. All right. So there's still, right now we call it conversion, right? So on the new system, you still have that 10-point scale, but the standard level uses the rubric. So if you're doing 1 through 5, it's still going to, you're going to look at that content and say, oh, for this standard, this kid got a 4, 4, 5, and a 3. So I am going to say, oh, well, that translates into an 80 because they did very well on those pieces, and I think that they've gotten that content. So you're going to have the course will be assigned the 10-point grade scale.
But there's also the automatic assignment.
Correct.
Of the grade. So just like in version 9, there's the conversion scale.
Right. You
still have some type of conversion that you have to work through at the very beginning to say, if I'm doing an automatic conversion, this is what I want a 1 to equal for conversation. So a 1 could be.
So they have to decide.
Yeah, you have to decide what those ranges are.
And you also, I believe, have the opportunity to prorate what the standards, the percentage that the standards are lending toward their overall grade.
Yes, you do.
So you have the opportunity, so even if you've set priority standards, there may be some that you've made a local decision that should have a higher percentage toward their overall grade, and you can prorate that.
Yes.
And then you'll have your conversion of what your rubric grade scale equals in terms of numeric grade, and it will roll up automatically what you've set up as the percentage that you want the standards to contribute to their overall grade, and what you've set up as the conversion scale for your rubric.
So that is kind of how you are, that's kind of why we actually get down to the assignment level. Because the assignment level, if you give the assignment an 8 out of 10, it can automatically set your standards to give them the E, M, B, or below, whatever your rubric is for those standards.
Or your 1
to 5, exactly. So they do work together hand in hand, and if you are still confused about how that actual conversion does work, I am going to point you to a lot of resources over on PowerSource that will help you understand how the PowerTeacher Pro grade book actually puts those pieces together.
And they're very helpful resources. So I would definitely encourage, if you're seriously thinking about this, to reference those when Jackie gets to them at the end of the presentation.
Right. All right, fine. So, let me just go back one quick second. So, this particular K-base, this is actually from PowerSource, and it does say traditional final grades can be calculated based on the standards final grades. So, and this is kind of what I was saying, is that the standard is set at the course level, and you can actually weight it if you, oh my heavens, I am so sorry. My click of my mouse, I have heavy fingers. The weight can be given at that course level. There are specific technical pieces when we're actually setting up the grade formula, but that's not more that's really not what you need to know. This is more technical stuff on the right side, the details. But all of this can actually be spoken to in detail out on the PowerSource website. So I will be sending you to the PowerSource website, to the Power Teacher area, and it will definitely help. And this kind of talks about what we've been discussing for the last few minutes, is that the scales automatically be converted, conversion scales to grade scales after the upgrade. We're going to talk about special codes. And we need to talk about special codes because currently we have everything in the 10-point scale. We have all your numeric numbers, and then at the bottom we have the INC incomplete, and we have all of those alpha codes. Now they are going to be separated and put into a special code scale all by themselves. So, because we need to know what a 0 means. So if I don't, incomplete means 0, and a medically excused means 0, and withdrawal failing means 0, the system gets confused. It says, I don't understand how they can all be 0. Which one do you want me to use? So what they've done is they've separated those alpha codes out into a special code where they actually have a numeric value. So that's kind of what all that means in a quick way, actually. And this, you know, I didn't want to get a lot of detail, but this is actually what the spreadsheet does look like. These are the different fields that we need to use that we are giving you for any of the content area import process that we're going to use for our standards. So I just wanted you to have it for your future reference, but we don't really need to get crazy about it.
Just talk for a second here.
Definitely.
So one of the things that we highly encourage you to think about, here at DPI, we are embracing some different methodologies, new methodologies across the agency involving implementation science. So I just stepped out for a second. I was going to get him to talk about some of our current initiatives. Well, I think you all are familiar with MTSS, and they utilize implementation science to roll out the initiatives. On the technical side, we did the same thing with PTPro. So the new upgrade for the PTPro gradebook, we utilize some tenets of implementation science so that we're using a framework where we're planning implementations and not just jumping in with both feet, that you take some time and investigate the what needs to happen, understand the risks, and have mitigation strategies for those risks, that you have communication strategies, all those different tenets of implementation science. And I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but I say that to say we will provide you with the template, and the template will have examples so that you can understand and have an idea of what you need to put into the template. Again, we will provide you with the entire list of standards, but you have some decisions you need to make locally about how you want those standards to roll up. And we can point you again to some different resources. But also, I highly encourage you to think about your testing phase of this implementation. How are you going to test this prior to putting it into your live PowerSchool instance? I can tell you from my work with several districts over the years, there was lots of experimentation and scratching of heads and rethinking, because once they got into it, they really realized that what they thought they wanted to see was not exactly what it turned out to be. So, and we can work with you on that as you work through, but I highly, highly encourage you to think about your implementation strategy, your plan, your testing strategy before you roll this out, because what you don't want to happen is you've communicated one thing to your parents, and then when you actually get it into the system, it looks very, very different from what you've been communicating and what you anticipated as a result or a final product. So we will send you the information and the fields here that you need to have as part of your import process. Yeah, and that's just more detail about the spreadsheet.
It is.
Yeah, we won't go into that.
Okay. So we also need to talk about going, all in versus not all in when we're actually talking about PowerTeacher Pro when it comes out in July. So it kind of talks to standards, because you can have all of your some of your teachers or schools going to PowerTeacher Pro because you thought, great, I'm going to have a couple teachers that are going to start PowerTeacher Pro and we're going to dig into standards. Think about that. So you may not want to go all in. You may want to have some teachers using the PowerTeacher Pro program. The others are staying with PowerTeacher Gradebook, which is the Java version. Don't just throw your teachers into PowerTeacher Pro thinking, okay, now they're going to use standards, because you have all of that other piece that we have to deal with first. So this particular slide is talking about kind of what is the difference, whether everybody's going to go or everybody doesn't go. I will say that if you say everybody's going all in to PowerTeacher Pro, it's fine. You can still turn off the standards. So I don't want you to think that you have to go, have to not go to PowerTeacher Pro because you're not going to use standards yet.
Right. There's a traditional
Definitely,
grading component in PowerTeacher Pro.
So going all into PowerTeacher Pro is fine. We can always turn off the standards and turn them on when we are ready to, start and utilize that process. So you still have this choice of having some teachers start and not others, but you can still have the teachers that are going to start your process with just the traditional grade.
Let me ask you, when you all decided to go with standards, about how long did you all spend in your planning and implementation phase?
Well, the exploration phase, if we're going to talk about implementation science, was probably about 6 months. We just gauged from principals and from parents kind of what their readiness was, especially our kindergarten parents, because we decided to do K-1 with the initial implementation. So we talked with our, gauged from our kindergarten parents, kind of what do they expect from a report card? What do they want to see? And so that was about 6 months, and then we spent probably another 6 to 8 months developing our purpose, our rubrics, our priority standards, and then sent out surveys again to our kindergarten parents, because they were going to be, we didn't know who our future kindergarten parents were going to be yet. So and some preschool, because we knew they would be rolling into kindergarten, about how useful they thought the draft of the report card would be, what other suggestions they had for that, because those are our ultimate end users, right? The parents and the students. So, and then we spent, so that was about an academic year, and then we spent the next year, well, we were kind of informing parents of what was to come, right, by engaging them, what was to come in first grade, by engaging them in that process. So we had initial implementation. Of course, we did training for teachers. We had we trained in different ways, face-to-face. We had videos. We set up a website that teachers could use as a resource. So initial implementation occurred after a year of exploration and installation.
Okay.
And the installation, of course, was the PD, the setting up of technical assistance through the website, et cetera. But if you're looking at doing it beyond just rolling it into kindergarten or first starting it and then building on that after, year to year, adding a grade level, if you're looking doing K5 or K8, or I would say you would need more time and exploration as well as installation for that.
Okay.
That would just be my advice.
Thank you.
Okay. So I do want to make sure that you see a lot of this information. So Tiffany was very helpful in giving us some of the resources that she was using that helped her get into everything about standards.
So let me, on the bottom of this slide, I'm going to go to the last two bullets, the 5 obstacles to grading reform and standards-based grading and reporting will improve education. That would be, those are great tools that you could use in a principal meeting just to get the conversation started if it has not already, and start to gauge readiness. Now from a district leader perspective, the first bullet in that box, developing standards-based report cards, I would highly recommend that be something that district level leaders who are going to possibly facilitate the development of this to read. I mean, I use this literally as a guidebook to get from, the beginning to where we ended up implementing. So it doesn't use implementation science per se specifically,
Right.
but it gives you great steps to follow, like identifying your purpose. Like, what's the purpose of grading? Why do we even have grades? And the importance of standards, really having a good understanding of why it's important to separate reporting on content and reporting on behaviors, right? So there's critical things, soft skills, right, that we want students to know and be able to do that aren't necessarily spelled out in the content standards. And I think for students and parents, that became a really helpful, separating those out became very helpful in really targeting and identifying interventions and strategies that we could use with students for those soft skills as well. So again, those are just 3 resources, and I would encourage you all to share others with each other if you're thinking about exploring this, because there are obviously many more resources out there, but I just found those to be helpful.
That's great. I appreciate that piece. It's anything we can learn is a great tool. Hunter, I know that you were out for a couple of minutes. We were talking about implementation science. Is there a couple things you want to say as far as the rollout from your perspective?
Yeah, so this is coupled with PowerTeacherPro, and for folks that are in our first cohort of our early adopters for PowerTeacherPro, hopefully you've seen that we've been using some of these implementation science frameworks to help push that initiative out to districts and charter schools. And so implementation science is really just a collection of frameworks that's put out there by the National Implementation Research Network that's hosted at North Carolina University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, UNC. Sorry, I'm an NC State guy, so I stumble over that one. But it's a
I'll kick you out later.
so it's a collection of active implementation frameworks looking at stages of implementation, implementation teams at the state, regional, district, school levels, looking at implementation drivers, cycles, looking to scalability as well as systemic change, and then of course implementation measures. And so the way that's operationalized and what you'll see in our implementation plan for PowerTeacherPro is grouping those frameworks around 4 main buckets. So starting with communication and visibility, looking at professional development coupled with coaching, then moving into technical assistance to provide that hands-on, face-to-face or virtual support. And then lastly, looking at research and evaluation. So making sure that there's measures and metrics for success, that those measures are analyzed on a regular basis and used to inform that continuous process of improvement. And so hopefully as you see more and more initiatives being rolled out at the state level, and as districts work to build their capacity around implementation science, you'll be hearing these frameworks come up more and more often, because this is really, it's an evidence-based practice that shows that if you take an innovation or something from research, using these frameworks are much more effective to help that innovation stick and actually change practice and behaviors.
And I have an example from our experience with standards-based at the district level and developing it. The first year of implementation, we used a rubric for content that was like 1 to 4. I can't remember exactly. It's been several years ago. And then for behaviors, we used like 1 through 3. And we found through surveying throughout the course of that year, parents were confused because, you know, the 1 through 4 rubric, okay, this is what the 4 means, but the 3 means that something similar, you know, for the behaviors. So we, through that feedback, we adjusted, and the behavior rubric then became like alpha, right? We set up an alpha rubric for that. So anyway, that's just an example of just, you know, using that data and evaluation. And I need to step out, but I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you all for your critical work at the district level, and through lots and lots of challenges. We just appreciate so much what you all are doing for students, and just for even exploring this, you know, as a potential opportunity in your district. So thank you all so much, and thank you to our Power School team for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you. I appreciate everything.
And before we move on, I did want to mention, just to close the loop on implementation science, if you guys are interested in accessing more information or learning about some of the frameworks, definitely check out what's called the AI Hub, that's Active Implementation Hub. There's great modules, some distance learning opportunities, and some great resources and tools to help with that building capacity around implementation science. So just wanted to make sure that resource was known as AI Hub.
And what we'll do is we can put that as a link with up the first slide with the bit.ly, so that you'll have both of those. You have access to this presentation, but also we can put the AI Hub link there as well.
Great.
Perfect. And I will also put the Power Source link there as well. Because the Power Source will also help you understand the Power School side of standards and not just the theory behind standards-based grading.
So if you are a curriculum leader or district administrator, check with your Power School person, your Power School coordinator, to make sure you have access to Power Source if you want to go in and look at additional information through the Power Source resource tool.
Okay, I do have a question. I asked Power School, Francine, I'm going to get to you offline. We'll talk about that. You're talking about
We do have some adjustments that we need to make to the grading scales prior to our implementation.
right.
So thank you, Franny, for pointing that out.
Yeah, definitely. Because we have to discuss the all-in versus the not all-in stuff.
Yeah.
So, are there any questions about what today was about? And did you, I guess maybe we should put that in a separate poll or something, but obviously we have more steps to take in the future regarding this. This is our step one, just kind of getting your feet wet and maybe thinking about things maybe in a different way than before this webinar started. I really appreciate the people giving all of their feedback, Hunter and Rosalind for being available just to speak to it in general. The other resources on this slide is Cammie and Tiffany from the professional learning team. So we are all going to be part of this to help you along. Rhonda Lehman is actually kind of here in the background. She's kind of been listening to all of this. And she was really working with the EC side of the world. So she kind of understood that EC math stuff that we're looking at in the spreadsheet hierarchy stuff. So Rhonda, I appreciate you being available to us as well.
If you have additional questions, you can, through your Power School coordinator, you can log a ticket with our home-based support center if you've got additional questions about the different resources, and we can triage that information through the agency to get you the answers to the questions that you have.
Right. So I know that this is a very stressful time of year, and a lot of things are happening at this point in time. So our next big thing actually is end of year. So after kind of that happens and we kind of all recover from that, we can continue with, you know, what do we do next? And how do we go about helping you the best way we can?
So we thank you for taking the time to spend with us this morning. That concludes our webinar. If you don't have any more questions, the webinar will be posted along with the slide deck. We will post it on the NCSIS website. We'll also make it available to Dr. Perkins so they can send it out through the curriculum listserv as well, so that you'll have those links.
On the something listserv?
The C&I leaders listserv.
Okay, awesome. All right. I think
that concludes us for today. We thank you for calling in, and have a great rest of the day and a great weekend.
Goodbye, everyone.
Save the question log.
Oh, yes, I am definitely going to save the question logs.
Or save it.
Yeah, I need to.